Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Well, we made it to Friday. That's definitely a win in and of itself. And we have good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. We're going to be talking more about California and their gerrymandering. Jim calls it a Gavin-mander, and I think that's definitely accurate. He's gotten what he wants so far legislatively, but there's another major step to go, and we'll talk about both of those things. We'll also be taking a look at one of the worst possible signs you could show up with at a political rally, and it happened to be in the hands of a staunch Virginia Democrat yesterday. She was trying to heckle Winsome Earle-Sears, and let's just say she got famous, but not for the reasons she was hoping. And we're going to start in just a moment with Donald Trump getting some good news from the New York Court of Appeals regarding that absurdly large financial penalty in the civil trial about the overvaluing his assets, which is an amazing case in and of itself. But Jim, I know you're happy to be heading into the weekend, but the news cycle doesn't stop.
Yeah, look, I know everyone. It's been a very tense time. Everybody's kind of, on edge. This is, of course, the third preseason game of the season for the Jets. No starters will play. Most of the people who play in this game will not be on the team's rosters. But I understand if you're looking at that, it's like, God, I just can't focus on anything else except that. But let's try for the next 20 minutes or so to talk about some other things going on.
We'll get to the martinis in a moment. For now, if it's time for a doctor's appointment, ZocDoc is the best possible place to go. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. And I've told the story a number of times. Got referred to a specialist by another doctor, and that specialist was just like, I just love to do surgery. Let's do surgery. I'm like, I don't think so. And the friend recommended a different one, went on ZocDoc, looked at all the reviews, and like, this person's perfect. And it certainly turned out that way. So ZocDoc gives you the resources you need to make a good decision.
With ZocDoc, you can book in-network appointments with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty of medical care, from mental health to dental health, from primary care to urgent care, you name it, they can put you in touch with the right doctor. And you can filter for doctors who take your insurance, see if they're located nearby. As I mentioned earlier, I found an optometrist very close to my house. See if they're a good fit for any medical needs you may have, and you can check to see that they're highly rated by verified patients, not just some bot coming along and saying they're 5 stars. Once you find the right doctor, you see their actual appointment openings, choose a time slot that works for you, and click to instantly book a visit.
Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML. Again, ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our good martini. And of course, 2024, at least until he got the nomination and got elected president again, did not start off as a great year for Trump, other than the primaries pretty much going all his way. But the left's legal attempts against Trump were in full bloom. We had multiple trials. We had the civil trial, the financial trial with Judge Engoron. This is the one brought by Tish James about Trump overvaluing the assets. Trump gets convicted on that and gets saddled with a $465 million civil penalty that with interest was over $500 million. And then, of course, there's the whole Alvin Bragg, Judge Mershon, Stormy Daniels trial that happened as well. But yesterday, a 5-judge panel on the New York Court of Appeals, or at least 3 judges on that panel, said that the penalty against Trump in that conviction in the financial trial is out the window. Here's our friend Dana Perino on the Fox News Channel.
Fox News alert, a New York appeals court just this morning has thrown out President Donald Trump's massive civil fraud penalty. The decision from a 5-panel group in New York's appellate division changed the original decision that stood to cost Trump over $500 million. One appeals judge calling the lower court's penalty an excessive fine that violates the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution. You might remember that New York Attorney General Letitia James' office says despite this decision, they will not be dropping the case.
And now Tish James is under investigation for mortgage fraud. So, what goes around comes around, I guess. Yeah, violates the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is, against excessive, cruel and unusual punishment. Now, it's worth pointing out that the conviction at the moment still stands. And Jim, the case itself, as Andy McCarthy and others pointed out, was absurd. And the penalty was egregiously absurd. So this is a good move.
Yeah, one of the things that jumped out at me, Greg, is that the decision by these judges was 323 pages. And none of them, the opinions constituted a majority. Greg, I don't know if the next Dangerous Click novel is going to be 323 pages. That is a long legal decision. And look, Justice Peter Madison said, look, while harm certainly occurred, it was not the cataclysmic harm that can justify a nearly $500 million award to the state. Now, if you're, this is a lesson of folks in office, almost certainly Democrats, who've decided they want to get Trump. And because Trump is the root of all evil in their minds, there is no case that is too minor to bring against him, as seen in the Alvin Bragg case. And look, they got a conviction. The question is, has anybody else ever been prosecuted for this sort of thing? Has there ever been done longer? Has there ever been, doing each filing and the thing done separately? Like, there are all kinds of things that are unusual about that, but fine. You know what? They put it before a jury. Jury said, oh, Donald Trump's involved. He must be guilty. And that's how that shook out. In this case, does Trump, would you say, oh, Trump has overvalued his properties? Can you get a fine? Sure. Can you get a $500 million fine out of it? No, I don't think you can. And thus, if they had gone for whatever this crime is, there's always precedence. And you always have a sense of this is the normal range of what the government would seek as a penalty in these sorts of things. And if you go within that recommended range, you have a really good chance of it being sustained on appeal. Because you can say, hey, this is normal. This is precedent. We've done this lots of times. There's nothing unusual. There's nothing to point to the idea that this is some sort of deliberate targeting of this individual for reasons outside the scope of the law of the state. In this case, they couldn't do it. And a whole bunch of and I don't think all these judges are huge, Donald Trump fans, but they just looked at this and said, this is a wildly, absurdly high fine level. This is clearly trying to make an example of him. This is clearly a matter of when O.J. Simpson got a long jail term for that dispute in the hotel room and that, allegedly holding somebody at gunpoint, one of his lawyers from the original trial says, well, they beat us in the fifth quarter. Right? We beat them in regular time, i.e. the actual murder trial in L.A. They came back and the idea is that they got O.J. Simpson. In this case, it's very clear that Tish James and a whole bunch of people absolutely detest Donald Trump with every fiber of their being and pursued a penalty that was just, absurdly out of whack with precedent. And that's what this happens. So this is what happens when you do these sorts of things. There are murderers who don't get fines that large, right? There are very few criminals who have ever gotten that. The idea of Trump overvaluing his assets, clearly, based on this penalty, you think it was one of the most heinous crimes in American history.
The conviction stands. The penalty most certainly does not. Trump was able to post a $175 million bond. It'd be nice to have that laying around, huh? Anyway, interesting developments up there in New York State, and interesting developments potentially with your health when it comes to your liver, because over 30% of Americans have a sluggish liver, which is a problem that often goes undetected. And Dose Daily is on a mission to educate all of us on why it's so important to maintain your liver health. And Dose has created an incredible product to help you do just that. Dose for Your Liver was formulated to cleanse your liver of unwanted elements, aid digestion, and maintain your body's filter.
The liver produces and regulates cholesterol, stores vitamins and minerals, and impacts your digestive and metabolic health, amongst many other things. And this science-backed formula will promote that liver function. It'll help you with digestion, ease your bloating, maybe even boost your energy levels. Now, the clinical results, this is a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial. Now, Greg, some clinical trials, they just need glasses for when they're seeing far away, or they need it closer, they're near. Sometimes they have one. This is a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical. This clinical trial couldn't see what the heck was going on, right? It's a dose for your liver, lowered liver enzyme levels by 50% in more than 86% of participants.
It also reduces brain fog, helps you with getting more sleep. It also comes with this cool metal kind of shot glass thing, and it tastes great. So support your health with Dose Daily. Save 25% on your first month when you subscribe at dosedaily.co/3ml or enter the code 3ml at checkout. Please note the 25% discount applies only to subscription orders and not one-time purchases. Cancel anytime, no hassle. That's dosedaily.co/3ml to get 25% off your first monthly subscription with the code 3ML. All right, Jim, for our bad martini, we head back out to California. It's also the subject of the morning jolt today, as you've titled it, California Draws the Gavin-mander, which is very appropriate because the whole term gerrymander comes from Elbridge Gerry, who drew questionable districts in Massachusetts more than 200 years ago. So it's an old and tried and true practice in this country for political parties to try to get a leg up. But of course, this is in response to the Texas Republicans redrawing their maps. But this passed the state assembly 57-20, and lawmakers on the floor, as you point out, erupted in applause even before they closed the vote. So this is clearly about saving democracy and not about gaining a partisan advantage. The state Senate passed it hours later on a party line vote of 30-8, and now it goes to the November 4th ballot. And a few days ago, earlier this month anyway, we looked at a poll where I think it had been asked in a vacuum, do you prefer lawmakers drawing the maps, or do you prefer this supposedly independent commission, which has been around for the last 20 years, to draw the map? And it's like a 30-point margin in favor of keeping the independent commission. But now that we've got a very specific issue headed to the ballot, at least according to Gavin Newsom's polling, so unless he's polling the people in his own office here, there's a major switch here, 22-point advantage now in support of what he wants to do. 57-35, I think, was the number. 8% undecided. So, I mean, I don't fully trust Gavin Newsom's polling, but pollsters would really have to stink to be off by like 50 points now compared to that other poll that we saw. So what do you make of what's happened in the legislature, and what do you make of the shifting numbers here?
Well, first of all, Greg, I'm glad you began by mentioning Governor Gerry. This, by the way, is a sign that it really should be pronounced gerrymandering.
Correct.
I am not going to try to, like Sisyphus, push that up that hill and also point out I believe it is pronounced GIF, not GIF, even though the inventor of the term insisted it should be pronounced GIF, like the peanut butter. I'm skeptical of that because among that it's apparently short for graphics interface file. Do we call it a graphic if it's an image? No, we do not. So as far as gerrymandering is just fine. The angle of this that I found most fascinating is that California first had this nonpartisan commission handling redistricting for its state legislative district lines. That was back in 2008. Then they did it for U.S. Congress lines as well. This was back in 2010. Passed 61-39. This was not Californians liked this idea, and Arnold Schwarzenegger liked it. Gray Davis liked it. These two guys ran against each other for governor. There was this general sense, like a whole bunch of people in California saw how lawmakers controlling redistricting was making it very clear that it's easier for people to win and have a partisan advantage, that they were never going to lose their job. And one guy who said this is a bad idea, was willing to stand up and fight for it, was California State Senator Alan Lowenthal. He's a Democrat from Long Beach. Got this enacted. He was considered one of the architects of this. And then he went on to Congress, and he really wanted to make this the rule in the country. And the first legislation he ever passed in Congress was in this. Would periodically come back and say every state should be using nonpartisan, independent. By the way, I've heard people arguing that the Republicans who are on the commission weren't really all that Republican-y, and the ones who were allegedly nonpartisan. I get those gripes, but at minimum, California was making an effort that the people who were going to draw the lines should not be the same people who'd be running for re-election under those lines. Like you could at least by one degree of separation, you're kind of minimizing the self-interest of the people who were doing this. And so Lowenthal retired back in the 2022 election cycle. And he said, look, again, this is one of the signature accomplishments of his career. That same year, his son, Josh Lowenthal, ran for the California State Assembly and won a seat in the chamber. Greg, yesterday, Josh Lowenthal voted to undo one of his dad's signature accomplishments. And he said, it is important that Californians have a voice in selecting the political party that controls Congress in 2026. They have that, right? We have elections. In fact, by drawing the lines to make even more safe Democrat, you're undermining that. You're using these words. The words do not mean what you think they do. But apparently he says that his father, the architect of the commission, also urges its temporary suspension. Now, Greg, you and I and our listeners know, once a lawmaker, Lawmakers love to give back power after a certain amount of time. When they say
Yes, of
this
course.
is a temporary measure, they always keep their word. They never go back on their promises. And they're just, like this a long, proud history of lawmakers giving back emergency powers quickly and easily, particularly the ones that influence their political ambitions and who's going to win elected. They love to give that back. As I pointed out in today's Jolt, right now there are 44 national emergency declarations still in effect. One of them, the national emergency in respect to Iran. You're like, oh, well, Iran's, it's been a problem for a long time. Yeah. That was declared by Jimmy Carter back in 1979. Now, I'm not saying that it's completely undone, but there are 43 others that were never done. My favorite little factoid, way back in 1973, the federal government did a review, found that there were 4 national emergencies in effect that had never been declared over. One of them was by FDR from 1933. About closing banks Now, it was only about closing banks that year, but they never declared that national emergency over. And so like 4 decades later, we've got, national. So when they say, oh, don't worry, we'll go back in time for the 2030 census, will they? I think once lawmakers get back the power to draw their own district line, I think they're going to keep it. I think they like it. I think that, so maybe I'll be proven wrong on this. But it just kind of struck me as like getting this nonpartisan or bipartisan redistricting commission passed. That was a long, hard fight. And the moment Democrats felt like, oh, we could lose the House, we need this to help our advantage of the House, whoosh, out the window. And like, I know if he says his dad's on board with it, fine. If my signature accomplishment in my work, my life was undone, it'd be a real awkward Thanksgiving later this year.
Take that to heart, Garrity boys. If you ever get elected, make sure that you...
When they write John Kerry, master of foreign policy, or the Chinese lab leak was always a far-fetched theory, then
That's when it's really going to get awkward. But yeah, as Scott Bertram puts it, whenever the Democrats say there's a threat to democracy, what they really mean is a threat to Democrats. Just fascinating to watch. And of course, both parties are aggressive in this. The Republicans are doing it in Texas. The difference is they were legally allowed to do so. The Californian effort here is upending the existing Constitution to try and shove this through. Also, I just love the Schwarzenegger impression. And then you mentioned Gray Davis immediately after that. And it reminded me that Arnold Schwarzenegger always referred to him as Cray Davis.
Cray, that's right.
Cray Davis.
This is the second best Arnold Schwarzenegger impression you will find on this podcast other than Robert Davi.
Robert
Davi was so good. I was like, he could do prank calls as Arnold and fool people.
Search up the Davi episode about Schwarzenegger going to the Die Hard premiere with Robert Davi and his reaction to that whole situation. That's one of the greatest moments on the podcast. But anyway, fascinating to watch what happens in California. Do you believe the polls? Do you think there's been this much of a shift based on the specific circumstances, or is this just projection from Newsom?
I strongly suspect that a lot of it comes down to the wording of the question. If you say, do you stand with Republicans in destroying democracy and destroying the vote, or do you want to give Democrats control? It's going to go there. I think this is probably a little shakier than people think. Now, between now and Election Day, and it's in November, so it's not like it's a huge long time away. I think the Democratic message machine will probably persuade enough people to get this, this passed. But just like, most Democrats, or in California, there are plenty of Democrats in California who just have this idea, like, there should be some bipartisan commission. It shouldn't be in the hands of lawmakers themselves. And I don't think you have to be a raging partisan Republican to think, that's a good idea. So it was kind of this good government accountability, fair elections type mentality. And there were Democrats who didn't like it back then, but who, kind of recognized that once it passed 61-39, this thing was going to happen. So I don't know. I think there's a chance that this actually goes down, and I think it would be delicious if this goes down. But that would kind of require California to say, you know what, this is attempting to change the law for a short-term partisan advantage and to help Gavin Newsom run for president. The old district lines are fine. Oh, by the way, like Republicans have 37% of the vote and they got 17% of the seats. I mean, they're already gerrymandered in favor of Democrats, right? The idea is that the Democrat complaint is that this isn't fair. This is unfair. It's already unfair in our favor, but it's not unfair in our favor enough. And I think that's kind of an inherently ridiculous argument. So an interesting question will be, how much do Democrats, can Democrats be convinced that the redistricting in Texas is the worst thing in the whole wide world? Oh, by the way, when you do redistricting in a place like Texas, there are Republicans in Texas who are going to end up with a less secure seat because you're spreading out more Republican. There are probably going to be more ones with Republican advantage, but the Republican advantage in some of those seats is going to be less than it was before. God knows what the political environment is going to be like on Election Day 2026. But it's conceivable this backfires. And it's conceivable that if there's some big blue Democratic wave, that some House Republicans in Texas lose their seats who otherwise would have kept them under this. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen. I'm just saying it's within the realm of possibility. So we'll see how things shake out. I'd rather not see all these fights going on. But the California Democrats are being absolutely ridiculous in their claim that democracy on the line, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll see if it's a tipping point. People are talking about other red states. Scott Jennings saying you could easily have all 6 districts go Republican in Kentucky, for example. So we will see. All right. Well, if you're stressed out over your state's congressional map, or you just are seeing more lines in the mirror, even if you don't have a lot of stress, OneSkin is your answer. And you need to protect your skin from the sun, but what if you could protect it from things like collagen loss and inflammation as well, and even repair some of the damage you did when you were younger? And the good news is there's OneSkin. Listeners, do you know what a senescent cell is? It's a cell that's been around a long time. It's an old cell, and it's a key driver of skin aging. OS1 works at the cellular level to improve key aging biomarkers while reducing the visible signs of aging, including lines, wrinkles, and sagging skin. OneSkin believes the purpose of skincare is not just to improve how you look, but to optimize your skin's biology at the cellular level so it's more resilient to the aging process. Yeah, Mrs. Corumbus told me as soon as she first tried OneSkin, I love how light this is. It absorbs into the skin so quickly. It's not heavy. It's not greasy. It really feels good. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company, and by focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using the code 3ML at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with the code 3ML. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. So please support the 3 Martini Lunch and tell them that we sent you. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And there's been more cultural upheaval in Northern Virginia, which was the key to Glenn Youngkin getting ahead of Terry McAuliffe 4 years ago in the Virginia governor's race. And Winsome Earle-Sears is hoping for a repeat here in 2025. Most of the polls, in fact, all the polls show Abigail Spanberger ahead. Most recent polls show it now down to single digits, but still outside the margin of error. So Winsome Earle-Sears going to need some help. Well, enter Democratic activists. Winsome Earle-Sears was up in Arlington County because the big 5 school districts in Northern Virginia, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, Arlington, and Alexandria, are all defying the Trump administration's new rules on Title IX and boys and girls sports, boys and girls bathrooms and locker rooms, and so forth. And so this issue is heating up again in Northern Virginia. And so Winsome Earle-Sears appeared at the Arlington County School Board meeting last night to voice her concerns about their refusal to comply. And then she also had a rally in Northern Virginia, which is heavily populated by lefties. And at this rally, a woman is holding up a sign with messages on both sides. And if you look real carefully, the shot is from behind her, so you can't really see very well what the message is that she's holding up towards Winsome Earle-Sears or whatever's happening there. But I think it says, "Hey, Winsome, you have a gender-neutral bathroom in your house." That one, whatever. But the message that's facing the camera as she's holding this up says, "Hey, Winsome, if trans can't share your bathroom, then blacks can't share my water fountain." Well, that has not gone over well, shockingly. Sounds like Democrats from the Jim Crow South here. Now, reports following up says, it was satire meant to provoke conversation about the absurdity of prejudice. If anyone thinks we are actually supporting separate drinking fountains based on race, they're mistaken. Jim, I'm sure if a Republican held up a sign similar to that, they would easily be given the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I suppose we should point out, Spanberger did eventually put out something, please stop holding up racist signs at my rallies, you idiots. You are not helping. Please hide in a gender-neutral closet in your house until after Election Day. Now, and good for her. And, most Democrats who saw this are like, this is astonishingly dumb. Look, no getting around it. I think you mentioned the other day that there's a poll that has Winsome Earle-Sears within 7, and that's good news. The fact that that's what counts as good news is a sign of how challenging this race is for Republicans. But Winsome Earle-Sears does have some serious advantages. And a major, major one is the idiocy of Democratic grassroots activists, because think about how you have to write that, and at no point does it cross your mind saying, blacks can't use my water fountain, holding it up and saying, and they're going to know Republicans are the racist ones. This person gets one vote in Virginia, just like you and I do, Greg. Doesn't that feel great?
Yeah.
Also, this person, I would just argue, probably should not be allowed to operate heavy machinery or cutlery in their kit. They just don't. You just don't want to let them handle things. They just seem to be lacking that. They seem to, and I'd be like, oh my goodness, nothing like this has ever happened. Then it dawned on me, Greg, just 4 years ago, the Lincoln Project really thought it was going to be helping Terry McAuliffe running for governor when it had some of their activists dress up as tiki torch carrying white nationalists, go and showing up at a Glenn Youngkin rally and trying to, say, look, see, white nationalists hate, support Glenn Youngkin. Now, the problem is, first of all, one of them was African American, which probably undermines your message of we are white national. Like, insert the Dave Chappelle sketch here. Just get the idea. I, for one, am glad to see the white nationalists. I know diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't in style, Greg, but I was just glad to see them have an affirmative action program and to say, look, we really want minority white nationalists to really feel like a welcome because we believe in equality in white nationalism. But so here's the thing. If you, the Lincoln Project, hadn't done that, then nobody would show up with a tiki torch and say white nationalists are terrific and all that. It was like the only people saying white nationalists are terrific are you, right? The phone call is coming from inside the house. The white nationalism is coming from the inside the alleged, the Lincoln Project. So, in other words, like as dumb as this woman at this rally is, she's not alone. There is precedent. There are Democrats who are really convinced that if they dress up and act really racist and show up at a Republican event, everyone's going to say, aha, Republicans are racist. And I don't think that works anymore. Like, the whole thing of the 2024 election was that it wasn't just, Trump didn't really do any better amongst white voters, particularly amongst white collar white voters. What they really ended up was doing better. Like, he did better amongst every minority group, particularly Latinos, but also at blacks and groups of others. Like, do you think just maybe that there's been this like kind of condescending tone amongst white progressives for a long time, and that not all of them, but a significant chunk of the minority community is like, I'm fed up with this. So it is delightful. It's delicious. Yes, it's not, there are Democrats who are going to say, hey, it's not fair to judge us, the candidate, by some schmo who shows up at my rally. And I'm like, gee, wouldn't that have been nice to have been in place for the last 30 years, right?
Yes. No kidding. You know how you know she's a Democrat? Because you don't know her name. The media is not going through her yearbooks. And
everything about her if she were,
Yes.
She's lucky that they checked, because there's a chance that like, the media people covering this could have gone in a very different direction and said, Imelda Schumacher of Arlington, Virginia, says she believes that blacks should not be using, Imelda Schumacher, but if you happen to be a listener named Imelda Schumacher, I was thinking of Imelda Marcos and her shoe collection and all just kind of mushed together. But like this woman could have been like, her name, she could have been famous globally, overnight, all over. She would have been the main character on Twitter or X. And it's the lesson, you never want to be the main character on Twitter or X any day. And that's, but thankfully, like, oh no, she's one of the good. She's just a really stupid ally. Everybody calm down. We nearly had a DEFCON 1. There are racists out there. Alert. And no, she was just being ironic and stupid. Really, really stupid.
So when you don't know her name, who her neighbors are, or what they have to say about her, or what her third grade classmates or teachers maybe thought of her, just remember Joe the plumber who didn't want to spread the wealth around. And the media destroyed the guy, or at least tried to. But
the Republican was a consultant who said something that was, maybe a little snotty about the Obama daughters. And I'd say, tisk, tisk, don't do that. But man, yes. They went back and talked to her high school classmate. And by the way, how many of us, if you go back to our high schools, you're going to find a classmate who did not like us and be like, oh, that guy was always a jerk. Oh yeah, he was just the, fat loser who, all kind of stuff. So like, my suspicion is that like the fact that we don't know anything about this is an exceptionally lucky woman. She's phenomenally stupid. And a significant chunk of people are like, she had the best of intentions, so we're going to avert our eyes.
Yeah, and so
she accidentally committed a racism.
So the media has no curiosity whatsoever. Par for the course. Jim, have a good weekend. I will see you again on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. Love to have them listening. Thanks for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. They really do help us out a lot. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us all on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.